dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.
And you're back on Liberty Nation Radio. I remain your host, Mark Angelides. We're continuing our conversation with Liberty Nation's Legal Affairs Editor, Scott Cosenza. Scott, so we've been talking about the universal injunctions in Trump v. CASA, C-A-S-A. And we've discussed what ramifications it has. We've discussed how court cases will proceed now from district levels. But what I really want to get into is the actual opinion that came down on this and how it was so out of the ordinary in terms of its language. Care to enlighten us?
Well, yes, and it's a reaction piece. So you can't understand the language or really, I think, discuss it meaningfully without discussing what it was reacting to, which is Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson wrote in dissent. She didn't write the court's dissent. How it works is the Chief Justice, after getting a vote tally on these cases, assigns a majority opinion to one of the justices in the majority, and for the dissent in the dissent, and then other justices can write separately if they choose to. But one of the reasons why that gives him a lot of power is, for instance, before we just get to answering your question, a chief justice might give a more moderate voice, like Amy Coney Barrett, a case in this instance because they want the most maximum level of agreement. And if they gave it to a firebrand, then maybe they won't get a sign-on to get as many justices as possible for a majority opinion, which does give that opinion power. That this is a 6-3 opinion gives it a little more power in legal circles than if it was a 5-4. So Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson took her pen out after saying that she agreed with everything. I think it was Justice Kagan wrote in the majority proper, or excuse me, the dissent proper. But she took her pen out literally just to say how awful this reasoning was and how basically it was. And I'm not being hyperbolic here. It would. There's a strong case to be made that it would lead to the end of the republic. That's what Ketanji Brown Jackson's dissent said, and it denigrated the majority opinion and the effort to explain their reasoning and the reasoning itself. It was really an insult from her to them, like just a high level. By the way, it didn't get schoolyardish, I don't think, at least not much, but it was a very much insulting, denigrating opinion. It didn't respect their thoughts or their judgments. It just hit them kind of below the belt with it. And so that's what Amy Coney Barrett was reacting to. And boy, she did react to it.
Before you come into the reaction here, which really is quite fiery, I felt that, and I'm just a layman in this, but I felt that the language of Justice Jackson's piece, it was a little social media-ish, because she wrote something period, spelling out the word period like you see on social media. I thought that must be the first time that any justice has ever written that.
I think she's our youngest justice. She's certainly the newest addition to the court, and unfortunately, I think we're going to see more stuff like stuff like that.
I clap back against the majority
Yes.
opinion.
Oh, that's so hilarious that you said that. Yeah, exactly.
All right, so let's get to what Justice Amy Coney Barrett actually reacted to, how she reacted to Justice Jackson's.
One of the funniest kind of and biggest, deepest cuts, I think, was when she criticized Jackson for talking about how something was like legalese. And it's like, we're the Supreme Court. You can't say something's like, you're not going to pay attention. Oh, that's just legalese. Like a politician, a senator maybe could get away with that. Certainly a congressperson. But for a Supreme Court justice to kind of dismiss a thing as being, oh, that's inside baseball. Like, well, where is the place for the discussion of this inside baseball if
if not the house that Frederick Douglass built, right?
Yeah. And I'll tell you, this to me is like, this is kind of a big deal. There's two. I'll just say, they say Jackson, this is bad writing. Justice Jackson decries an imperial executive while embracing an imperial judiciary. And that's after Justice Jackson had laid out how basically district court judges have a duty under her reading of the law to issue nationwide injunctions. There should be many more nationwide injunctions if we listen to Justice Jackson's,
Rationale.
admonition, basically, in her opinion. So it's a real fight for not just saying, "Hey, what you said is wrong," but it's what you said is not just what you said is wrong and I'm right, but what you said is like galactically awful and wrong. It's the end of it's the because Justice Jackson is saying to the majority, what you're doing puts the republic in danger because of the lack of oversight then that the executive will have. That's sort of boiled down her argument. Yeah. And then the majority is saying to her, you are so ignorant to the function of your argument that what you don't understand is what you're saying is really what will lead to the end of the republic. Well, Barrett didn't actually say that. And I'll just say her final line was, Justice Jackson would do well to heed her own admonition. Everyone from the president on down is bound by law. That goes for judges too. So
it's spicy.
That's a pretty strong, that's a pretty strong comeback for justice. Let's again, talk. Signed by 5 other members of the court, including the Chief Justice of the United States. And I checked just to be sure, she did articulate that section of her opinion with a different section number so that, again, it would have been so easy for any justice to say, I concur with the majority with the exception of, section 4, but none of them did. They all signed on to the drubbing back of, because I think they were probably all insulted by her insults of them.
Well, I think the majority probably had it right on this, didn't they? Because we've just seen in recent days, we saw the No Kings march it's claiming that Trump is acting like a king. Well, it seems to me that if a single person in a courtroom somewhere can upend the entire process of what's happening in the country, then it's multiple little kings, isn't it?
That's what their argument is. My libertarian nature has me always skeptical of the power to limit the power of the executive, which is at the tip of the spear, whether it's the Trump administration or the Biden administration or Obama or Bush or anybody else. They're at the tip of the spear of violating the rights of Americans. Sure. And so it's a little trepidatious for me anytime I hear of a restriction in the right to kind of potentially dial back executive action, because legislative action is sort of more glacial, I guess you'd call it, rather than like out there actively violating people's rights, which I want the protection from. But at the same time, it's not like Congress passed this law that gave them the power. Part of the lengthy opinion from the majority examined where these powers come from. It's not just like, well, courts can check the executive so they can do whatever they want to enact that check. And the truth is, it has been abused. So why wouldn't we expect, there to be pushback? One of the things that we talked about, that chart that the Harvard Law Review published about the injunctions,
number of universal injunctions,
and recent presidents. One of the interesting statistics they teased out with that, Mark, is the percentage of those injunctions that were issued by a judge who was nominated by a president of the opposite party. And guess what? It's about 50-50, okay, until Biden and Trump. And for Biden, it was 100% of judges from the other party. And for Trump, it was 92%. So out of his 64, 59 of those. And so I think that plays into the partisanship too, where it's like, well, even if there were more injunctions, but they were, 50 to 60%, you could even go up to high 60% and say that's within the margin of like randomized selection from the federal judiciary. But you're getting over 90% from the other party. Well, there's clearly something going on there, right? It's the political nature. So the combination of kind of runaway political nature of it and no clear grant of authority for these things, then I'm reluctantly agreeing with you, by the way. I don't know if you remember, but you started
I figured that.
You started this by saying the majority had it right, didn't they? And I guess I'm coming around to saying, yes, I think probably they did. But I'm skeptical about it. But yes.
Okay. We are going to find out what this means for Donald Trump and his efforts to limit birthright citizenship after this short break. Don't go anywhere. We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.